According to the U.S. Navy Submarine Warfare Report 1943, during the mid-stage of World War II, most American officers still believed that victory at sea depended on experience and instinct. In smoke-filled command rooms, discussions focused on wind direction, the echo of water, and the feel of the helm, rather than on calculation tables. Depth charges, once seen as the symbol of naval power, were still being deployed thousands of times each month. Statistics show that by the end of 1943, British and American forces had conducted 5,174 depth charge attacks, but only 85 submarines were sunk, a success rate of 1.6%. According to Admiralty Anti-Submarine Report number 27, this figure did not diminish confidence. On the contrary, it was considered proof that a good commander will find his own probability. The old doctrine was built on the belief that humans could read the sea. Underwater sounds, propeller noise, minor explosions, metal impacts were believed to be the language of the battlefield. A seasoned officer could sit beside the sonar, close his eyes and say, "It's to the east, 2,000 yards away." At sonar training classes in Key West in 1942, instructional notes clearly stated, "Machines are just aids. It's the human ear that decides." This was an era when experience and intuition were considered equal to weaponry. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Pacific, the Japanese submarine fleet followed a different philosophy. For them, underwater warfare was the art of vanishing. Absolute silence, that was the unexplained order. According to the Imperial Japanese Navy Submarine Doctrine Manual 1943, turning on the radio without orders could be considered an act of suicide. RO and I-class submarines often carried a single posted order in the compartment. No transmissions, no detection, no dying with noise. They believed that in silence there was safety, and in waiting, victory. These two beliefs, though opposed, sailed side by side on the same ocean. One side trusted intuition and experience, the other, silence and discipline, and both rejected numbers. According to the Office of Naval Research Archives, in 1943, only 3% of American officers in the anti-submarine force had any training in applied mathematics. People like Walton Pendleton, a sonar engineer who worked in acoustic data analysis, were a tiny minority. Pendleton was 37 years old, quiet, a graduate of the Annapolis Naval Academy, and had briefly taught fluid mechanics. When war spread across the Pacific, he was assigned to command the Buckley-class destroyer escort USS England, DE 635. According to the Naval Personnel Record, April 1944, Pendleton was assessed as overly analytical, lacking flexibility. In the naval environment of that time, that was not a compliment. He did not drink, did not share battlefield stories. In meetings, when officers discussed firing angles and dive experiences, Pendleton silently recorded numbers. Some mocked him. "Does he think he can calculate the whole ocean?" He replied, "The ocean has rules too. The question is whether we have the patience to read them." According to former sailor Samuel R. Blake, in a 1968 interview, Pendleton never raised his voice. He just nodded and pointed to the chart. Everything had a reason, even when the sea was silent. To Pendleton, numbers were not dry formulas, but his way of understanding war. In a letter to his wife dated the 12th of April 1944, he wrote, "Each ping is a heartbeat. If I listen long enough, I'll know when it stops." That line was later quoted in the War Letters Project, U.S. Naval Museum, revealing a blend of engineering and emotion, mathematics and human instinct in a space filled with water and echo. According to the U.S. Naval Training Bulletin 1944, captains at the time still preferred the deep boom of the depth charge, viewing it as the sign of real action. A strong explosion could shake the entire hull, flicker the lights, and carry sound for miles. Pendleton preferred the silence of sonar. He told his deputy, "When the explosion roars, we lose information. In silence, we hear everything. That statement ran entirely counter to wartime psychology, where sound was equated with power. At the same time, Japan fell into the trap of its own beliefs. Submarine officers were trained that silence meant survival, but they forgot that silence also meant blindness. According to the post-war interrogation report, Tokyo 1946, many Japanese captains admitted, "We lost contact for days, afraid of being detected by radar." When one was asked how the final hours felt, he simply answered, "No one knew what was out there. All we knew was to wait." Those beliefs, seemingly opposite, were both rooted in stubbornness. The Americans feared losing sensation, the Japanese feared losing silence. Both resisted change as technology began entering the fight. In early 1944, a new weapon appeared in the US. Navy's arsenal, the Hedgehog bomb launcher, capable of firing 24 projectiles, each 65 pounds with 35 pounds of torpex, 200 yards ahead of the ship, forming an attack circle with a radius of 130 feet. According to the British Admiralty Development Report, 1943, this weapon could maintain sonar contact throughout the attack, something the depth charge could not do. Yet for many commanders it was too quiet, too theoretical, lacked the boom to believe it worked. Pendleton looked at the success rate charts and smiled. A weapon that could maintain sonar contact, allow precise targeting, and not break silence. If the math is right, the explosion doesn't need to be loud, he wrote in his notebook on the 10th of May 1944. According to the Pacific Command Training Memo 1944, 90% of destroyer escorts still didn't believe Hedgehog was a viable option. But to Pendleton, it was the only path forward. He understood that to win at sea, one had to hear more clearly, not explode more loudly. As the war moved into mid-1944, the old beliefs began to waver. Ships moved through the Pacific night, each carrying its own philosophy. One side waited for sound to confirm victory. The other feared sound would mean death. And in that ocean, a young officer was preparing to prove that formulas could change history. And in that silence, the old beliefs began to crack. According to Fleet Radio Unit Pacific Report No. 47, the first signal appeared at 1:50 a.m. on the 19th of May 1944, north of Bougainville. It was a steady, low-frequency sound, moving at 6 knots, emitted from an object underwater. Sonarman William Cobb stared at the screen and said softly, "Sir, contact bearing 078, range 1,500 yards. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton stepped beside him, eyes fixed on the readouts. Beneath the thick black water was the Japanese submarine 116, the first of 7 boats in the NA Line reconnaissance route, carrying 107 crew members. On deck, red light reflected off tense faces. According to the action log of USS England, 19 May 1944, this was the ship's first real engagement. The young crew, most fresh out of Norfolk, had never heard a real underwater explosion. Everything unfolded quietly, no cannons, no alarms. Only the faint metallic hum kept pace with the waves. Pendleton quickly read the data, depth 150, bearing fixed, speed constant. He ordered speed reduced to 12 knots, sonar contact steady. In his tactical notebook, he had once written, "If you want to hear, be quieter than what you're hunting." So instead of ordering a depth charge drop, he chose the weapon no one in the fleet yet trusted, Hedgehog. According to the British Admiralty Weapon Test, 1943, this system fired 24 projectiles, each 65 pounds with 35 pounds of torpex, forming a 130 feet radius impact ring ahead of the ship. The bombs only detonated upon striking solid objects, unlike depth charges, which disrupted sonar across hundreds of yards. Pendleton understood that difference clearly, but he also knew the risk. If Hedgehog failed, the ship would be seen as an example of reckless theory. According to the Naval Combat Intelligence File 1944, just before the launch, the executive officer asked, "Sir, we're really doing this?" Pendleton simply replied, "We trust the math." At 13:41, the first volley was fired. 24 bombs soared across the surface, formed a bright white circle, then disappeared beneath the water. The entire ship held its breath. 30 seconds, 40 seconds passed, no explosion. Miss. The sonar voice came again. Target turning port. Depth, 300. Pendleton ordered a reload and angle adjustment. Second attempt, still silent. Third, nothing. On the sonar display, the submarine signal wobbled, then stabilized. According to the after-action report USS England, on the fourth attempt, I-16 changed course, dove to 325 feet, beyond the initial depth estimate. Pendleton frowned. He asked the sonarman to reread the full vibration sequence, recalculate the new trajectory. In under 2 minutes, data was re-entered, firing angle adjusted by 3 degrees. On the fifth attempt, at 14:33, the order was given. Fire. 35 seconds later, the sea swelled, flashed, then collapsed, according to the U.S. Navy Operational Summary, Pacific Theater, May 1944. The precise detonation at 325 feet generated pressure equivalent to 1,500 pounds per square inches. Submarine 116 was torn apart, air compartments exploded, the engine room collapsed completely. On the surface, no one spoke. After about 20 minutes, fragments of wood and a slick of oil surfaced, spreading over half a mile. Pendleton did not smile. He stepped onto the deck and looked down at the water. A young sailor stood nearby, holding a cup of cold coffee. "That's it, sir?" Pendleton quietly replied. That's the sound of silence working. In the late afternoon sun, the ocean was so still they could hear the metallic cup touch the steel floor. The victory report was sent to Tulagi in Frupak No. 49. Commander Hamilton Haynes noted briefly, "1 confirmed kill, new weapon effective." That same day, the fleet radio unit decrypted 7 more signals from the NA line, indicating more Japanese submarines were operating along the route to the Marianas. But for Pendleton, the most important thing was that single number, 1 successful attack out of 5 attempts, a 20% efficiency, 12 times higher than the typical depth charge. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, the Imperial Navy Command recorded a short entry in its file. I-16 lost contact, reason unknown. According to the post-war analysis document 2024, divided by JP Submarine Records, there was no distress signal, no final transmission, only a blank space in the mission log. When Japanese historians reopened the file in 1947, they found the last page had a pencil note written in haste. Heard distant echo, violent shaking, unclear source. And in Washington, the report from USS England drew attention from the technical command. Admiral Ernest King, after reading the appendix, underlined a sentence in red, "Verify data. If true, weapon changes doctrine." According to the Navy Archives, 1944 Memorandum, this was the first time in the Pacific records that a destroyer escort had recorded a submarine kill on a single patrol day. That evening, Pendleton did not log the victory. He wrote only 1 line. The equation held, 5 trials, 1 result. In the narrow mess hall, yellow light glowed against metal walls. A few sailors opened leftover cans of cold ice cream from the previous week. As a spoon struck the frozen surface, one sailor paused, then smiled. The strange sweetness amid oil and sweat reminded them they were still alive. According to sonar engineer William Cobb in a 1965 interview, "No one cheered. We looked at each other, then at the water. It was flat like paper. That's when I knew war had turned a new chapter. And in that silence, the Pacific changed forever." Ready for the next segment whenever you are. According to Imperial Navy Deployment Order No. 211, Admiral Sue Toyota approved a plan to establish an underwater barrier stretching from Truk Island to Manus. This line, codenamed NA Line, consisted of 7 RO series submarines, each carrying 56 crew members, spaced 50 to 70 nautical miles apart. The goal was to detect the direction of the U.S. fleet's advance toward the Marianas. It was a strategy of defense by invisible eyes, a submerged surveillance network beneath the Pacific, covering more than 3,000 square miles. In a declassified Japanese document from 1947, an officer once wrote, "We are the eyes in the dark. When we see the light, it means we are dead." Meanwhile, at Tulagi, the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, FRUPAC, decoded Toyota's entire transmission order. According to the FRUPAC signal log, 20 May 1944, the patrol positions of the NA line were sent to U.S. command just 6 hours after the Japanese transmitted the signal. From there, the war entered a new phase, a war of data. A task group of 3 escort ships, USS England, DE 635, USS George, DE 697, and USS Raby, DE 698, was ordered to form a counter-sonar net, moving in parallel in a spread formation covering 16,000 yards. Radar was set to auto-scan every 30 seconds. Sonar ran continuously, each ping echoing like the heartbeat of the sea. Pendleton called this the battlefield of numbers. He believed that if sonar contact could be maintained long enough, any submarine could be decoded through statistics. According to the Pacific Anti-Submarine Operations Manual 1944, coordination between the 3 ships in formation reduced the search area to only 0.5% of its original size. Inside the cabin, the map displayed hundreds of arcs representing sonar wave trajectories, intersecting at a blurred point, where he predicted the enemy was hiding. At the other end of the NA line, Japanese captains were also following their own principles. They were unaware the enemy had deciphered the orders, but still held faith that deep water is safe. According to Imperial Submarine Doctrine, Section 3, submarines under threat were to dive to at least 300 feet, shut down all communication systems, and drift silently to evade sonar. Sailors lived in darkness for weeks, surviving on dry rations and condensed water from cooling systems. One survivor recalled in a 1952 interview, "We heard metal ringing through the water, then silence. The sound felt like it came from the ocean itself." Aboard the USS England, Pendleton continuously adjusted tactics. He ordered sonar paused every 15 minutes to reduce interference, then reactivated it, creating a steady pulse like a heart monitor. "The enemy believes in silence, but silence makes them predictable," he wrote in an internal note dated May 20. According to the U.S. Navy Training Bulletin, Pacific Fleet, this was the first time a tactic had been used that combined intermittent sonar sweeps with surface radar detection to listen to both movement and stillness. 2 opposing philosophies coexisted in the same space. The Americans acted through data decoding radio signals, measuring sound drift, calculating probabilities. The Japanese acted through instinct and natural law, relying on the experience of those who had once dived deeper than 400 feet beneath the sea. In Pendleton's own words during a 1958 interview, "They saw the sea as a cloak to conceal. I saw it as a mirror to reflect." As May 21 arrived, both sides moved into battle positions. USS England held the center, USS George to the west, USS Raby to the east. Each ship maintained total radio silence. The sky was lead grey, the sea rolled with small waves. On the operations map, small dots represented Japanese submarines lying in wait, ready to move under cover of night to recharge batteries. Pendleton looked at the chart and murmured, "7 fish in the net." According to the operational summary, Pacific Fleet, 21 May 1944, at 3:50 a.m., the radar aboard George picked up the first signal at 15,000 yards, a slow-moving metallic object heading northeast. The combat order was given via Morse light, form contact triangle. The 3 ships shifted formation, encircling the target. None of them knew this was only the beginning of 12 days that would go down in naval history where silence would become a deadly weapon. And in that silence, both sides believed they were unseen. According to the Pacific Fleet Action Report No. 171, within 72 hours, from May 22 to the 24th of May 1944, the escort ship USS England sank 3 Japanese submarines in succession, RO-106, RO-104, and RO-116. The 3 attacks occurred at different coordinates, but the pattern was an exact match. Same radar detection timing, same sonar approach angle, same firing distance, same pre-calculated depth, like a formula repeated with precision, and each time it completed, a submarine vanished from the map. In Pendleton's campaign journal, the page dated May 22 contains a short line. Data confirmed, row 106 eliminated. The next, handwritten, repeat pattern. According to the U.S. Naval Combat Evaluation Office, the process followed a closed-loop sequence. Sonar detected a slow-moving object underwater, about 6 knots, at an average depth of 250 feet. The ship turned, held distance at 1,500 yards, sonar locked onto the target, firing angle calculated. The Hedgehog system launched 24 projectiles, falling at 23 feet per second. If the target was at 400 feet, the rounds needed 17 seconds to reach depth. If at 150 feet, only 9 seconds. In that window, Pendleton predicted heading shift, speed variation, and calculated impact point using average movement probability. Margin of error could not exceed 30 feet, roughly half a submarine's length. He once said in a post-war recording, "There's no such thing as luck. Every shot is a solved equation." And those equations yielded the same result. RO-106 was hit at 5:01 a.m. The blast pressure cracked the hull at compartment 3. RO-104 sank the next morning, shattered by 12 consecutive detonations, and RO-116 was taken down on May 24, when Pendleton correctly predicted the Japanese captain would choose a shallow dive to avoid deep water pressure. According to Admiral King's summary cable, the 25th of May 1944, the phrase 20% per strike was underlined in red in the report. Out of 5 attacks, England scored 3 direct hits, achieving 40% efficiency, 25 times higher than traditional weaponry. On the operations map, 6 circles marking the kill locations lay along a continuous curve, like a chart proving a closed mathematical equation. Pendleton wrote in his logbook, "The enemy moves like an equation with a single solution." According to the Naval Historical Records, Section C, he spent 4 hours after each attack cross-referencing sonar data, refining the trajectory estimation algorithm. As time went on, each Hedgehog launch from England shortened the window between detection and fire to just 90 seconds. Targeting deviation dropped from 5% to 2.3%, a level of precision never before seen in naval warfare. But out at sea, those numbers meant the destruction of human life. At depths of hundreds of feet, temperature rose quickly as the hull endured pressures over 1,200 pounds per square inches. In the post-war file Japanese Submarine Debrief Report 1947, an engineer who survived from RO-109 recounted, "We heard 3 echoes. The sound spread in many directions, then everything shook, the pressure gauge burst, water sprayed from valves like molten steel. None of those submarines managed to send a distress signal. They were destroyed before the first transmission could be made." The Americans recorded an oil slick 0.6 nautical miles long, spreading into a black circle on the ocean surface. When the report was sent to command, the phrase, "no survivors," was repeated 3 times. According to the Pacific Fleet Summary Log, the total number of Japanese sailors killed in the 3 attacks was 163. No ceremonies, no funerals. The sea kept everything. Pendleton did not celebrate victory. He looked at the map and redrew the sonar curve, a closed line from the first ping to the final disappearance. If they'd changed course by 30 yards, every calculation would have meant nothing, he told his executive officer. It wasn't pride, but an acknowledgement that war had been reduced to a chain of probabilities. According to the U.S. Navy Tactical Memo 1944, After the 3 successful strikes, the England became the model for training all escort destroyers in the Pacific. Commanders called it the mathematical kill chain, a data-driven sequence where humans were merely the final variable. And on the other side, deep in the ocean's shadows, Japanese captains still believed deep water was a safe refuge. They didn't know that with each added foot of depth, another equation was being solved. And when the numbers met the sea, everything else drowned. According to the U.S. Pacific Fleet Action Report, the 25th of May 1944, when the USS England's report reached Washington, it was immediately forwarded to the office of Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Navy. The bulletin read, 3 confirmed kills within 72 hours. Weapon, Hedgehog. Efficiency rate, 40%. Some analysts suspected a statistical error, believing the 40% figure far exceeded all precedent. King reread the appendix 3 times, tapped his fingers on the desk, then scribbled 6 words in the report's margin. There'll always be an England. The phrase was later transmitted to the entire Pacific Fleet, becoming the slogan of the anti-submarine campaign. According to the Naval Communications Record, 26 May 1944, King ordered all anti-submarine training units to collect data from the England to update their curricula. He saw this victory as a case study of data warfare, proof of a new era, where machines and calculations replaced instinct and intuition. In a letter to Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, he wrote, "When a decision is based on probability instead of hunch, war enters a different chapter." From that point on, the term data-based strike appeared for the first time in the U.S. Navy's internal reporting system. Pendleton, upon hearing that the phrase had spread across the fleet, only smiled. He didn't care about recognition, he cared about the numbers. "If the data's right, reputation is unnecessary," he told Lieutenant Harper, assistant sonar officer. According to the post-war interview transcript, 1951, Harper recalled, he looked at the young sailors logging data and said, "You're writing the Navy's future with chalk and wave meters." Meanwhile, in Tokyo, the shock spread quickly. Admiral Sue Toyota received news of the loss of 3 submarines in just 3 days. According to the Imperial Navy Dispatch, the 26th of May 1944, he convened an emergency meeting with the commanders of the submarine fleet, a small briefing room, dim yellow lights, a map of the Pacific on the wall. No distress signal, no final transmission, the communications officer reported. Toyota remained silent for a long time, then issued a new directive. All remaining submarines to dive to 400 feet, no battery charging at night, maintain absolute silence. The order was sent through the military radio system at 22:30 that night to all vessels still positioned along the NA line. According to the Japanese submarine order log, the 27th of May 1944, this directive was recorded in the files with the note, Special Silence Protocol. Submarines row 105 to row 109 were to follow the stay silent and survive strategy. However, that change created a paradox. The quieter they became, the more predictable they were. Without battery charging, electrical power dropped faster than expected, reducing speed and maneuverability. By ceasing communication, they lost contact with each other and no longer knew their comrades' positions. According to naval engineer Shigeru Araki in the Tokyo War Debrief, 1947, silence was no longer a refuge, it became a blindfold. Pendleton understood this well. In his journal dated May 27, he wrote, "The enemy has chosen silence, which means they are blind." FRUPAC data confirmed Japanese submarines began altering movement patterns, surfacing less frequently. This inadvertently helped U.S. forces narrow their search zones more accurately. According to the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific Log, 28 May 1944, the absence of signals meant that every time a submarine exploded beneath the sea, the sudden silence in the corresponding frequency band became direct evidence pointing to the next target's location. From a tactical perspective, this was the moment Japanese naval tradition collapsed. Those who had believed steadfastness and discipline were the foundations of survival were now trapped by their own framework. According to the Imperial Navy Doctrine Analysis 1946, commanding officers did not understand the true cause of the losses. They wrote in reports, "Sound came from above, then the entire hull shook. Weapon type unknown." One survivor added, "There was no explosion sound, just a broken pressure gauge and water pouring in. We didn't know what was killing us." On the American side, the story was different. After every victory, Pendleton required the crew to record all sonar data, time, speed, and target turning angle. "This isn't a battle log, it's training data," he said. The salt-dampened sheets were carefully numbered and sent to Purvis Bay for archiving. According to the U.S. Naval Technical Report, June 1944, this was the first time in naval warfare history that each attack was preserved in numerical form, not personal diaries. Two worlds moved in opposite directions. The Americans believed in probability, the Japanese believed in discipline. One side won by trusting the equation, the other lost by staying loyal to command. Both were guided by technology, one wielding it, the other consumed by it. According to the Naval Review 1945, King called it the turning point of naval thinking. He wrote, "When war is driven by data, every decision becomes predictable. But when the enemy starts learning math too, we'll have to think of something else." In the narrow cabin of USS England, Pendleton read that telegram and closed it. The sea outside remained calm. Wind steady. He looked into the night, where submarines drifted beneath the surface, waiting for a command that might save them. And in that waiting, tradition drowned. According to the U.S. Pacific Fleet Operational Summary, 31 May 1944, radar from the USS George detected a metallic object moving northeast at a range of 13,000 yards. The object was identified as the Japanese submarine RO-105, the last of the NA line. It was still dark at the time, the wind light, the ocean surface flat as a mirror. Pendleton stood before the sonar board, pencil in hand, listening to each ping echo through the hydroacoustic system. The signal returned steadily, then vanished for a few seconds, then came back again like the weakening breath of a creature in hiding. He recognized the pattern. Every 4 minutes, the submarine turned 30 degrees, alternating left and right like a pendulum. "They think randomness can save them," he whispered, "but even chaos has a rhythm." According to the action report of USS England, the 31st of May 1944, Pendleton waited until the 5th rotation cycle before giving the order to fire. The first 3 Hedgehog salvos were launched at 4:05, 4:23, and 5:10, all missed by 100-200 feet, as the target changed course at the moment of detonation. Pendleton showed no disappointment. He quickly jotted in his notebook, "Left 30 degrees every 4. At 5:32, the 4th salvo began. 24 rounds were launched, descending along a precisely calculated trajectory, sinking at 23 ft divided by sec, reaching a depth of 300 feet in 13 seconds. At that moment, according to sonarman William Cobb, the screen lit up, then all signals disappeared. "Contact lost," he said, but no one in the room believed it was a malfunction. 30 seconds later, a sequence of tremors rippled through the ship's hull, low and long, like the sea exhaling its final breath. 15 minutes later, the ocean's surface bloomed with a black oil slick stretching half a nautical mile, scattered with fragments of wood, rubber, and faint streaks of smoke. There were no cheers. A young sailor looked over the railing and muttered, "That's the last of them." Pendleton simply replied, "No, that's the end of the equation." According to the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific Log, the 1st of June 1944, the strike on RO-105 was confirmed as the 6th victory in 12 days, marking the complete elimination of Japan's reconnaissance submarine line in the region. The final report from Admiral William Halsey's 3rd Fleet sent to Washington stated 6 submarines, 335 Japanese sailors killed, 40% efficiency, a number unprecedented in naval history. The NA line was wiped out. Japan's entire monitoring system in the Central Pacific collapsed. In a telegram to Admiral Ernest King, Halsey wrote, "The sea is clean. The line no longer exists." But Pendleton didn't call it clean. In his personal report dated June 2, he wrote, "The sea isn't clean. It's quiet to the point of dread." According to the Imperial Navy Loss Assessment, Tokyo 1945, Japanese analysts spent nearly 2 weeks trying to determine the cause. There was no evidence of mines, no traces of depth charges. The report concluded vaguely, "Possibly destroyed by unidentified weapon, attacking from forward vector." In a salvaged notebook from the truck base, the final line written by an officer on RO 105 read, "The sea is unnaturally still. Sister ships are silent. We await a signal but hear only the ticking of the clock." In Washington, Admiral King read the victory report without smiling. He simply added a line below, "Mathematics won the sea, but at what cost?" According to the U.S. Navy Historical Division Record 1946, immediately following the campaign, the U.S. Navy ordered the standardization of Hedgehog tactics across more than 700 escort vessels. All were trained in the England sequence: radar detection, sonar lock, Hedgehog fire, target confirmation. But Pendleton did not take part in the rollout. When the operation ended, he requested the ship return to Manus for repairs and a brief respite. On the night of June 3, standing on deck, he wrote in his notebook, "6 explosions, 6 coordinates, 6 silences. If this is victory, it's a solved equation with no remainder." That line is preserved in the Pendleton Papers, Naval Archives. Harper, the assistant officer, later recalled that after that night, Pendleton never used the word kill in his reports again. He replaced it with completion. He told me that every time sonar went silent, he could hear a lingering echo like the breath of someone cut off halfway. Harper recounted in a 1957 interview. On the other side, the consequences ran deeper. According to Japanese naval records, 1947, after the NA line was eradicated, Japan's entire reconnaissance submarine network had to be restructured but lacked manpower and signals. The surviving commanders referred to the waters where the England had operated as Hai no Muchan, graveyard of the sea. One officer wrote, "We believed that silence meant survival, but in the end it was silence that killed us." Pendleton didn't argue with that. He always believed that data warfare was indifferent to morality. It only required accurate input. According to the War Diary collection, 1944, he said in a brief meeting, "The math doesn't care who dies, it only cares that the numbers fit." And in the final report sent to Admiral King, he added a handwritten note in the corner of the page. "The sea is quiet, but we can't be sure it's a victory." When the ship returned to Manus Harbour, there was no band, no flags. The crew disembarked in silence. One sailor carried a melted can of ice cream. Another held a scorched sonar headset. They all looked out at the water, where the sun was rising. According to the U.S. Navy Photographic Unit Archive, June 1944, a photograph taken of Pendleton at that moment shows him leaning on the railing, the light reflecting off the still sea. The caption reads, "Commander Walton Pendleton, the man who made the sea silent." Ugh. The NA line campaign ended in silence, but within that silence, the world understood that war had changed its nature. Data had won. Humans had become variables. And within those numbers, only one question remained rising from the depths, where 335 souls still drifted in darkness. And in that silence, the sea forgot to breathe. According to Navy Department General Order No. 62, July 1944, the escort ship USS England, DE 635, was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, one of only 3 escort vessels to receive this honor during the entire war. At the same ceremony, Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton was awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in action against enemy submarines. The ceremony took place at Manus Harbour, sunlight glinting off the ship's hull. A young officer recalled, "He shook each man's hand, then stepped back in line, without making a speech. According to the official ceremony transcript, Manus Harbour, Pendleton gave no words of thanks, only said 6 words. The crew made the math work, yet the achievement was seldom mentioned. In 1944, with American public attention focused on Normandy and the European campaign, a small escort ship that sank 6 submarines failed to draw notice. According to the New York Times military section, August 1944, the only article on USS England was 173 words, printed in a side column with no photo. Journalists at the time were absorbed by stories of tanks, bombers, and generals. Pendleton appeared in no interviews. He declined an invitation from Paramount to make a documentary, writing in a letter, "If people want to know what happened, they should read the technical report." According to the Navy Casualty Report, the 31st of October 1944, at 9:09 a.m., a kamikaze aircraft struck USS England while the ship was on patrol in Leyte Gulf. The bomb pierced the forward engine room and detonated 15 feet below deck. 37 men were killed, 25 wounded. Flames spread to the midsection. Black smoke engulfed the ship within 10 minutes. Pendleton survived but sustained burns to his shoulder and face. He left the bridge last, carrying his logbook and sonar records. The post-action report underlined the phrase, "severe structural damage, beyond economical repair." On the 12th of December 1944, the Navy ordered all recovery efforts to cease. According to the War Assets Administration record, 1946, USS England was towed to Manus Port and dismantled in November 1946. Each piece of steel was sold for civilian materials. Part of the deck was recycled into roofing at a San Francisco steel plant. By March 1947, the ship that had set an unmatched naval record was reduced to scrap. A photograph of workers cutting the hull is preserved in the Naval Historical Photo Archive captioned, "Scrapped vessel, no further service." No line mentioned the 6 submarines or the 12 decisive days. Pendleton continued serving in the Navy for 17 more years. According to the U.S. Navy Personnel File 1961, he was promoted to commander, later becoming a sonar tactics advisor in Alaska. He retired in 1961, died in 1973 at the age of 66, and was buried at Arlington. His headstone reads, Walton B. Pendleton, U.S. Navy, Navy Cross. No mention of USS England, no reference to 6 submarines, no record of 335 lives. In 1960, the U.S. Navy named a new guided missile cruiser, USS England, DLG-22, later redesignated CG-22. According to the commissioning ceremony record, the 7th of November 1962, Captain William E. Flynn stated, "We carry a name that once made the sea fall silent." The ship served 32 years, participating in operations in Vietnam, the Middle East, and the Caribbean before being decommissioned in 1994. When CG-22 was scrapped, the name England disappeared from the Navy's register. Admiral Ernest King had once promised, "There'll always be an England." But after 1994, that promise faded into archives, along with dust, covered reports. At the National Museum of the United States Navy in Washington, D.C., a single Hedgehog launcher is displayed in a corner of the anti-submarine warfare exhibit. The small placard beside it reads, "Forward, throwing anti-submarine weapon. Success rate, 40%. No mention of Pendleton, no reference to England. Thousands of visitors pass by each year, few stop." A museum staff member said in a 1989 interview, "Sometimes a veteran recognizes the mount. They touch the metal and go quiet. We don't ask questions." Across the Pacific, in 1947, Japanese naval engineer Shigeru Araki, who helped design the sonar system for RO-class submarines, wrote in his memoir, "We didn't lose because we lacked courage. We lost because we didn't understand what we were hearing." The line is quoted in the post-war memoirs of Imperial engineers and became the symbolic epitaph of a generation. Araki died in 1964, but his words are still cited by scholars as the most concise definition of technological defeat when faith in silence is shattered by the echo of science. According to the Naval History Review, 1985, the 6 submarines sunk by USS England in May 1944 were confirmed again using Japanese war records. The coordinates matched Pendleton's reports exactly. The 335 sailors killed are commemorated at the Kure Submarine Memorial. Beneath the stone monument is an old Japanese phrase, "He who listens to the sea will hear his own sorrow." In August 1994, at the decommissioning ceremony of USS England, CG-22, only 42 people attended. An elderly veteran held up a black and white photo of Pendleton and whispered. He made silence speak. According to the decommissioning transcript, San Diego Naval Base, after the ceremony ended, the sky was windless, the sea smooth as oil. Some said that for a few seconds they heard a faint ping like a final salute from the old ship. 80 years have passed, and the record of USS England still stands. 6 submarines in 12 days, 40% efficiency, unmatched by any other ship. But in official history, that achievement is just a few short lines buried among tens of thousands of reports. The numbers remain, the memory is recorded, but the spotlight has moved on to bigger ships, louder battles, and pages written in bolder print. According to the U.S. Naval Historical Society publication, 2020, it is now called The Forgotten Record, a legacy lost, yet still echoing in the deep layers of American naval memory. And when visitors pass by the rusted Hedgehog, the afternoon light reflecting on the metal, it recalls what Pendleton once wrote, "War doesn't end with the explosion, but with the silence of numbers." And in that silence, history paused, listening to the sea. Have you ever heard stories of war so brutal that people could no longer tell the difference between the sound of gunfire and the sound of their own breath? Stories like that of USS England about men who survived by intellect and then quietly vanished into the sea are not just history. They are part of our shared human memory. If this story made you think of the years your ancestors lived through, or stirred something buried in your family's past, leave a comment. Tell me if you've ever heard, witnessed, or lived through anything during wartime. Every small story is a piece of a larger truth that helps us understand the past, so that none of them, those who once lived and gave everything, are forgotten in the vast ocean of time. A single follow, a short comment, even just a like, these are ways you can help keep stories like this alive. Because history doesn't disappear as long as we remember, and memory only lives on when someone is willing to listen.